March 4th to order.
ZBA.
ZBA.
You said ZBA.
She said ZBA.
Oh, okay. I guess my
Your
phone was
hearing.
affecting me. Yeah, cool.
Okay, I'd like to call the zoning board of appeals
Yeah.
meeting together, March 4th at 7 o'clock PM. Can we have respects to the flag? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary, roll call, please.
Sure. Bailey?
Here.
Basardi?
Here.
Bama?
Here.
Bennett? Benner? Here.
In case you didn't know, with 4 Bs up here. I'd like to change the agenda around a little bit and put number 5, approval of the agenda, up under 4 and move 4 down to 5. And note that the approval of minutes will be housekeeping items as stated in the corrective action memo from Terry. That's it.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Super.
I have a motion by Hazard, second by Bielli. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then approval of the agenda.
We just did that.
Pardon?
We just did that.
Number,
Minutes.
no, the minutes are going to go down to
Right, well, we just did the agenda.
approve the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a very confusing night tonight.
Okay. We'll go to approval of minutes, and those are mainly housekeeping items. I'll take a motion to approve the December 3rd minutes as presented.
I so move.
And I'll have a second.
Support.
I have a motion by Billy, second by Benner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Then we have
I
we
vote
need-
no.
You vote no?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I need a motion to set aside and vacate the decision to grant a variance for 77 South Gillespie. Anybody want to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to set aside and vacate the decision for the grant of variance at 77 South Gillespie.
Any a second?
Support.
I have a motion by Hazard, a second by Benner
Okay,
to
what's
set
the
aside
effect?
and vacate the decision to grant a variance for 77 South Gillespie.
Could we have a little bit of background on that? What's the?
Did you read your packet?
Yes.
We are going to be doing we are going to rehear 77 South Gillespie's hearing this evening.
Okay, why are you using the word vacate? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Because we have to vacate the decision that was made due to a...
Gotcha. A decision was made.
Right,
Gotcha.
okay?
Okay, thank you.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now, the notice of public hearing for 77 Gillespie has been republished, and the public hearing was reheard, it will be reheard this evening by the ZBA at today's meeting. So in saying that, then I need to set aside and vacate the February 4th meeting due to lack of a quorum. Do I need a motion to do that?
Okay, so we're going to set aside and vacate the February 4th, 2019 meeting due to lack of quorum.
I need a motion on that.
Second. I
Okay.
made the motion.
You made the motion? I need a second.
I'll second it for discussion. My discussion is, at the time that that meeting occurred, it looked like there was a quorum because there was you counted heads, there was a quorum.
Right, but because we had not approved the bylaws, that
Yes.
says we're a 6-member board, it took 4 of us, and we only had 3 of
I
us.
understand all that, I'm just saying, technically, maybe we did have a quorum, even though one of the people was not eligible. I don't know how that works out technically, but it could be confusing.
Okay, so I have a motion to set aside and vacate the February 4th meeting due to lack of a quorum by Bizardet and Bailey. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, we go into public hearing.
Okay, I'll make a motion to go into public hearing for a requested, do I have to read this whole thing? Of a requested front yard variance of 6 feet 4 inches and a rear yard variance request of 5 feet for PO-04-27-278-013, commonly known as 77 South Pulaski. At, what's the time?
It's 7:07.
7:07.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Moved by Bizardi, second by Benner, to go into public hearing regarding 77 South Pulaski. Do I need a roll call for that? Roll call?
Better?
Benner.
Yes. Bema?
Yes.
Sardi?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Okay. I'll ask the planner to give an overview of what the public hearing's about.
Good evening, everyone. We're here tonight to consider, again, a request for an application for variance for 77 South Pulaski. The site is zoned RM in our multifamily residential zoning district. This is on the west side of South Pulaski and south of Broadway Street. And the property itself is currently vacant, and it is about 4,062 square feet in lot area. As mentioned, the issue tonight is that the applicant would like to submit an application to develop the site with a duplex, which is that use which is permitted by right in the zoning district. However, due to the dimensional requirements of the zoning district and the size and shape of the lot, it would be necessary to consider these 2 variances. The first being variance from our front yard setback requirement. Within the RM district, we're required to have 25-foot setback. The proposed setback would be a 6-foot 4-inch setback, so we're looking at an 18-foot 8-inch variance. And then the second requirement that is under consideration is the rear yard standard is a 30-foot setback. The proposed setback would be 5 feet, so therefore the variance requested is a 25-foot setback. When we consider variances, we go over 6 individual criteria to determine whether those specific criteria are met. The first of those being compliance with the strict letter of the ordinance will unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for permitted use, or will render conformity unnecessarily burdensome. The issues revolving all of these situations is the configuration of the lot. Because a strict application of our standards will result in a building envelope that is not, would not be capable of holding a structure. So for example, the north side lot line on Gillespie only extends 52 feet, while the south lot line only extends 33 feet from the west to the east, from the east to the west. So therefore, it is also pie-shaped in that situation. With these minimal depths, when you actually take 25 feet off the front, 30 feet off the rear, I mean, there's no buildable envelope. So a strict compliance would make this an unbuildable lot, and that's would be considered unnecessarily, it would render the ability to use the lot for any purpose excuse me, the strict application of the standards would result in having the lot be unable of being utilized. So therefore, that meets that standard. The second issue is granting the variance would do substantial justice to the applicant. Because granted gives substantial relief would be more consistent with justice to other property owners in the district. Other RM properties in the district have been capable of being developed. And in addition, the site was previously occupied by a two-family structure, so it has been used in the past. So if this site were allowed to be reconstructed with a duplex, it would not be anything that is out of character with the previous conditions within the district. So they're within that location and within the RM zoning district. So by granting the variances, this would provide substantial justice to the property owner. Additional criteria is whether the current plight of the applicant is due to unique circumstances of the property. The unique circumstances here is due to the platted nature of the use, of the lot. As a result of the platting, the historic platting of the area, it results in this particular pie-shaped small lot. And so therefore, the applicant is not the one that resulted in the configuration of this lot. It's due to a unique circumstance. And this also is similar to similar reasoning for the fourth criteria, whether this problem is self-created or not. The applicant, once again, has not created the situation. They are dealing with the fact of the previously platted nature of this neighborhood. The other lots have been developed and platted, capable of being utilized due to their orientation, but however, because this is at the edge of the platted block, it's basically the remnants of what's left over. And so therefore, it's not something that was created by the applicant in this situation. The fifth criteria is whether the spirits of ordinance will be observed, public safety and welfare secured, and substantial justice done. By allowing for this site to be utilized for a modest structure, that would provide substantial justice to the applicant and would be in keeping with the ordinance, the zoning ordinance, and our dimensional requirements in general. Because generally speaking, the purpose of the zoning ordinance is to regulate and allow for the use of land in the village. And so by allowing for this site to be modestly developed, it would be in keeping with the goals and policies of the zoning ordinance to allow for that type of development. And then finally, the sixth criteria is whether to consider if the variance granted that's being requested is the minimum necessary to meet the requirements of the applicant. Once again, the applicant is looking at a structure that would result in a 6-foot setback from the property line, the front property line, and a 5-foot setback from the rear. When you look at the proposed floor plan, it's not a large structure, it's not a massive floor plan, it is something that is in keeping with other duplexes and other structures in the neighborhood. So by allowing for, by placing the site, by placing the structure in this location, it indicates that they're trying to create a structure, have a decent square footage size, and place it as squarely in the middle of the site as possible. For that reason, we do believe that these dimensions as requested are the minimum necessary to allow for modest development on the site. So therefore, we would recommend that the variances be granted based on the standards listed on our review letter that I've just summarized on the bottom of page 3. So I will be more than happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, through the chair.
as soon as after public hearing, Jill, then you can ask your questions, okay? Okay, so that's it for you?
Yes.
Okay, is there anybody in the public who'd like to address the board?
I would.
Okay, please get to the podium.
Hi, my name is Gail Bricks. I live at 4151 Seymour Lake Road, Oxford, Michigan. And I received a letter. I'm property manager for 52 Broadway and 56 Broadway, the two properties that adjoin this vacant lot. I'd like to point out the fact that the structure that was previously there was on city property. It was grandfathered, it was an old house, and according to the ordinances, specifically, 8.7, I think addresses this clearly. 8.7, damage by fire or other catastrophe, which states, any non-conforming structure or structure housing a non-conforming use that is damaged by fire, flood, or other means of over 50% of the structure's pre-catastrophe free market value shall not be rebuilt, repaired, reconstructed, except in complete conformity with the provisions of the ordinance. Ordinance exists for a rule. I mean, you just redid the ordinances to say that these are the ordinances. And now just because there was a structure there before, we're going to set them all aside and and grant variance. So that's thing one. I'd like to point out that I received a letter that said that this meeting was going to happen. This is the letter. It says, the applicant is appealing the primary structure setback and that a complete copy of this proposal is at the offices. So I went and paid almost $4 for this packet, and it really is pretty, I don't know how I was supposed to prepare for this meeting, because I had no idea that the original variance that was granted was going to be vacated. I had highlighted in my packet all the ordinances that it was in violation of. I had highlighted that there weren't enough members on the board, but the variance was granted. So I thought it was a done deal. I went on with my life. I received this letter, and so I was confused. Is he appealing the primary structure setbacks in the variance that was granted? So I guess basically what I'm trying to say is that the procedure to participate in this public hearing is pretty frustrating. I know that's not a technical term, but I don't know how I could have prepared for this meeting because I didn't know what to expect from this meeting. So I'm learning as we're going along. So, that being said, so the original application, the process wasn't followed. When he filled out his form for all the ordinance variations, they didn't address all those issues. Again, I put that all together in a packet and I asked for it to be made a permanent record of the original zoning hearing. I don't know if it was or not, but I would still like that to be the case. This second procedural application, kind of hard to follow, guys. So again, I put together another package and I'm going to give it to you and I'm going to ask that it become a record of this meeting, and it does highlight every ordinance that this approval would be in violation of, okay? Where else are we? I felt bad. There were things that were going on with that lot, and I was subjected to things, but I wanted to bring that to the board's attention of just how difficult it was for me to manage those properties and deal with the shenanigans that were going on that lot. I had to be politically correct and say someone did this or someone didn't do that. I may have offended, the developer, and I felt bad about that because it is not my intention to offend anybody. I'm just trying to be objective. The lot is a non-conforming lot, and by the ordinances that were just redone. I mean, they're brand new, and the taxpayers paid for that. And so a zoning board of appeals is empowered with such power. You guys are like a court of law. You know, there's only 30 days after a zoning board of appeal that you can actually even go to a court and appeal your guys' decision. And so, you know, the rules matter, the procedures matter, okay? So for that reason, I'm still here to object for all the ordinance violations that they are, and I can enumerate them, or I can hand you this packet and you can look at them again. And for the record, the people that I work for, they're tremendous people, high integrity, honest people. And they've empowered me to put the offer back on the table to purchase that lot and put an end to this trying to cram a duplex. How are people going to live there? Where are kids going to put their toys in there? And where are they going to park? You know, there's a long way to go. The fire marshal, you know, setbacks exist so that emergency equipment can get there and save lives. And if you guys approve something to cram something in there, you know, if you allow the owners to buy the lot and straighten it out forever and all time, this problem will be over. Maybe they can build a garage, increase taxes for the village. There's other options. And it can be a win-win-win for everybody in the equation. That's all I'm trying to say. So.
Okay, is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
I guess I would give this to Terry.
Yes, please.
Oops, I'm sorry. I took this. I
All
tried.
right. Anybody else? I have 2 letters, one from Michael Mukruska, the prospective buyer on the property at 77 West Gillespie, Oxford, Michigan. My first permission to file and proceed to the necessary hearings for a variance so he may build his home on his property. And I have one from Larry Royster. I own the building at 5 South Gillespie, Oxford, Michigan. This letter is to let you know as a neighbor to the project that Dave Weckl is proposing at 77 Gillespie Street. I have no objections at all. Furthermore, I feel this project will add value to our neighborhood. So if there's no other public comment,
I'd like to publicly comment a little bit more, if I may.
no, you have,
I may not.
But it's still open.
that's okay.
Okay. Again, to procedure. You're putting forward a letter. If I had known what this meeting was and I can get letters for other objections to this. Can somebody help me understand what the procedure is for this? If this is a vacating and a resubmittal, where's the documentation? Why isn't procedure being followed properly? This board is empowered with immense powers, is it not? And I take that very seriously.
Mr. Ortega?
Oh, well, in terms of the procedures, the very issue we're here tonight is because it was brought through our research and finalizing the previous meeting. The ordinances had been revised to adjust the composition of the board, to go from 6 members to 5. With that in mind, realizing that while the ordinance that allows for that was changed, the bylaws of the board were not changed. So while, under legal interpretation that could be, argued as to because the ordinance was adopted, that has the power, the village took the initiative to ensure that everything is in compliance, both the ordinance and the bylaws. So by doing that, so in understanding that at the previous meeting, those two documents were not in sync, the village took it upon itself to go through this procedure. So that way that when this is considered, both the ordinance and the bylaws would be adhered to. So for example, the board composition is 6 currently in the ordinance. Currently, our bylaws still say 6. So therefore, we needed 4 members at minimum to be here. And actually in order for the variance to be granted, a majority of the board members must approve. So therefore, 4 would have to vote in favor, because 50-50 is not a majority. So for that reason, this was undertaken. And the procedures are the same as previously, in which it's advertised at least 15 days prior in publication of record, and it's also everyone within 300 feet of the property is notified of this part of the public hearing. Whether someone has the ability or not to enter something into public record, that's the procedure that as long as we meet those public hearing notification requirements, that meets the statutory requirements of that. So in order to, once again, make sure that the previous actions do not contradict the current actions, that's why at first the previous previous variance was vacated. That's why that was vacated, because of the incongruity between the ordinance and the bylaws. So that's why now we're holding the public hearing, and that's why now they will consider it again with, so that way the variance, if it were to be approved, would have a majority of the board members indicate so. So that's the procedure tonight.
And in Discovery, one of our board members sits on the DDA, which is in violation of the Zoning and Enabling Act, so that he made the motion, so therefore we're rehearing this because of the fact that we're doing housekeepings on our previous meeting minutes and going forward, making sure everything is in place.
While I understand what you said, if you vacate an approval of a variance, that means we're back to square one, doesn't it? Doesn't it mean that we have to follow the procedure again, and should not, the applicant and, be here to respond to any questions that the public may have?
Well,
And present?
manager has been in touch with the applicant.
Technically, the applicant does not need to be present, they just need to make that application. The public hearing is the opportunity for anyone to speak both for or against.
Okay, then again, how about the clarity to the public when I receive a letter and the only explanation is appealing the primary structure setback dimensions? What am I supposed to glean from that? Is he appealing for is he going to build on the property line? I really in all honesty, I had no idea what that meant. So I went to the village and I paid almost $4 for this and was not clarified as to what this meeting is. So now I'm here and I'm like, oh, okay, we got some procedural problems, so we're just doing a do-over. So is this a do-over rubber stamping, just so that all our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted? Or is this board truly interested in looking at the original zoning? Because I'd like that one addressed where it says, it will not be rebuilt unless it conforms to zoning. Would someone please understand or explain to me why no one else is concerned with that? I mean, the zoning law specifically addresses this issue. And you guys are just setting it aside.
No, we're not.
I need to understand that.
I
Why?
can explain that to you.
Okay.
In 8.7, the reasoning is, you're absolutely correct, that when it comes to the reconstruction of any structure that is currently a use or a structure that is not conforming to our current standards as addressed, they cannot be reconstructed unless they are in conformance with our current ordinance.
And they're not. They have to get a variance.
Within our ordinance is the ability to appeal the dimensional requirements.
I understand.
So they are abiding by our current ordinance, which gives someone the opportunity to appeal based on the current conditions. So that is why the variance is being held. The ordinance has, and by statutory requirement, must provide a procedure in which an applicant who cannot meet the ordinance requirements has an appeal process. This is that first appeal process. So the current conditions are on 770 Glassby, as I just stated, that it's a current vacant site. Based on their dimensions, they can't meet our current up-to-date dimensional standards. So following this current ordinance, they must meet the criteria to be granted a variance if they wanted to develop it. So this is all within our current ordinance, and that is the procedure. For example, when someone is a non-conforming use, they can, if it's destroyed to 40% of the structure, or they can reconstruct it as previously done by merely obtaining a building permit. They don't need to go to any other issue. However, because the structure was more than 50% destroyed, they must go through the variance approval process. Just because the process exists doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get the variance, because they have to meet our 6 criteria. So that's why this isn't a rubber stamp. The board is, on all the members that are there, have to consider these 6 standards, and they have to come to the determination that a practical difficulty exists.
In addition to those 6 standards, don't they have to adhere to the ordinance?
They are adhering to the ordinance by going through this procedure.
Exactly. And the intent of the ordinance literally and clearly states, the intent is, and I can find the quote, read it to you if you need me to, not to perpetuate these kind of nonconformities going forward. So, God granted you a gift. He burnt that house down. And in doing that, it was a terrible experience. My tenant called me, oh my God, the thing's on fire. My fence was on fire. When they demolished it, it damaged the shed. It was a mess. And then it stood there and rotted for months and months and months. Nary a complaint from me. Inquiries, nary a complaint. Anyways, irrelevant information. The ordinance clearly addresses this exact situation. It even empowers you guys to buy it, to put it to bed. And I am empowered by the people who own the other 2 lots that we will
Okay,
buy it.
you're going over what you've already stated already. Do you have any other new information?
The information is that, rules and power exist for a reason.
Okay, is there anybody else that would like to say something?
Joe Medora, village manager. I just want to touch base on the procedure that we used. It's the same procedure that was used for the first application process. The notices were sent out the same, just to people to comply with the Zoning Enabling Act. The stated variance request was the same whether it was then or now. It's a dimensional setback variance. So how someone reads it, or whether they read it, or how they knew, or how this gentleman from way up at 5 Glassby may have, I don't know if he was in that circumference, got notified, or if he just knew about this and put it in. I can't say. But he was just, threw his letter of support in to be part of the record, I assume. But when I first saw the reading of this ordinance, when I was first requested to look at this last year before the holidays, I too ran across the part about the structure by fire and the demolition, or the construction, how it gets destroyed by fire. And then initially I thought the same thing. But then again, after researching it and looking at the ordinance, yes, like Mark said, but that there is a process to apply for variances that don't necessarily meet. That's what variances are. If there was no request for variances or approvals, then we would never have a zoning board of appeals. If something happens, it doesn't apply to the, doesn't comply, there is a process in place, and this is the process. And again, last fall, the zoning ordinance was amended Council approved some changes to it, and those things were took place, but seeing how the bylaws hadn't been amended also, I thought it'd be prudent for us to take back and do it and amend bylaws and get us both in sync with everything. So yes, although it is maybe a do-over of the same item, one gentleman that was sat here before in December had a conflict and was not, shouldn't have been on the ZBA. So that's what constituted, had he been counted, that would have been a quorum. He should have been counted, so therefore it wasn't a quorum, Mr. Bailey wasn't in attendance that evening. So tonight we have 4 duly, properly appointed ZBA members here, which does constitute not only a quorum and the ability to approve the zoning ordinance as recommended by the planner.
That's objected to.
Okay, is there any other new comments that anybody would like to address? If no other comments, I'd take a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing at 7:35.
Support.
I have a motion by Bizarre, second by Bailey. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Before we start the board's discussion, I want to remind you, the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act requires a majority vote to approve this item. So if anybody else would like to make any comments?
I have some questions.
So don't do this under discussion.
Well, right now, we're just out of public hearing, so we can just need discussion before we do anything.
Well, one of the things that I noted was that, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, because I think what you said was this was city-owned property. It was never city-owned property. It is, the city had nothing to do with it, the village. It
No,
was
the-
privately owned property.
No, I understand that. Maybe there's a misunderstanding. The way the house was situated, the steps came right down onto the sidewalk. There was no setback. So the structure was encroaching on city property. And now to comply, it would have to be put back farther, and there just
If you're going to make
been
comments, I'd like you at the podium.
Would you like me to go up there? I'm just trying to follow the rules. Would you like me to go up there?
No, I'm just correcting or just making sure that everybody understands that that was not village-owned property.
Did you
And the
understand
two
what I
letters
said?
that were read at the last meeting. There's nothing new that came up tonight. They were read at the last meeting.
Dave?
May I come back?
No, right now it's the board's turn.
Well, I understand, but she said something to me, so if we're going to be official on the record, I'd like.
I said it to the masses.
Okay, Dave?
The question is it really the case that the duplex that was there previously was not in compliance?
I was
Does
not,
anybody know?
It was
I
not
don't
a
know.
duplex, it was a house.
Was a house?
It was a duplex.
and
It was a
It was
duplex.
a single-family home that may have been converted into a duplex, but it was not a duplex.
Whatever it
It
was,
was
do we know what
duplex.
its de facto, do we know what its de facto setbacks were?
and even if we did, technically, we really don't need, I mean, if you were to consider the previous setbacks, one of the issues that you'd also have to consider is the fact that it would be reducing the nonconforming that exists. For example, if the property was along the front property line and if the property did cross into the right-of-way, now as proposed, it's going to be set back 6 feet at its closest point. There are further points along that elevation that are going to be even set back farther than 6 feet. And if you were to consider that, one of the things you'd have to recognize is the fact that the nonconformity is being reduced. Because before it was closer to the street. Now with this proposed requirement, it would be reducing the nonconformity. And that's sometimes considered when the existing structure was still there. Because there are times in which someone has a non-conforming structure, they want to reconstruct it. You have the non-conforming structure on the site, and then you can say, well, as we're being proposed, they actually will be reducing the non-conformity, so therefore that's in keeping with the spirit of the ordinance by reducing non-conformities. But officially, since it's not there, it's something necessarily, because it's about, I mean, you can kind of consider it, because it's up to your discretion in terms of whether you feel it falls into one of the criteria, which is, well, granted, exceptional justice, you know,
Safety,
spirit of the ordinance would be observed, public safety, welfare, security.
safety for fire.
Excuse me, he's
Well,
talking.
Yeah, and technically, now as proposed, whatever is constructed, if the variance was granted, if the applicant did construct a structure, they will have to meet the building code and the fire code. So anything constructed will meet the fire code, or else they won't receive a certificate of occupancy to use the structure, so.
Okay, I've heard an assertion made that the previous structure actually encroached into the right-of-way. I haven't heard any evidence for that.
Right, and,
And maybe you can't tell from the destruction of the fire, you can't tell whether, maybe there is no evidence.
yeah, I mean, that's why it's very hard to base a judgment on something that, you know, you don't have the facts in front of you, and it's just, you know, conjecture. I mean, you know, sometimes it's just hard to even consider that as a finding of fact, because there's nothing to base it on. It's not even something.
When I reviewed the draft of the previous minutes, I found that there were 3 numbers listed for the front yard. One says variance requested 6 feet 5 inches. If that's literally true, then the setback being asked for was 18 feet 7 inches. I think that's wrong. It says variance requested 6 feet 5 inches. On the next page, it says variance of 6 feet 4 inches. Now, maybe I shouldn't get all upset about 1 inch, but it does indicate that maybe these minutes have problems.
And that's the meeting for the, you're talking about the minutes about the previous meeting?
Yes,
Well, that no longer exists, because you just faked it.
that's right.
So it doesn't exist.
Well, it
So even if there might have been incongruity with those numbers,
It makes me suspicious of this whole document, the minutes of the previous meeting. I wasn't in attendance, so I can't be sure. But it seems to me as though if the variance requested was 6 feet 5, then the requested setback would be 18.7, which doesn't make any sense to me.
right. But once again, that was the previous meeting.
I know, but it means that whoever wrote these minutes
I
made
can
an
answer
error.
that for David if he wants. It was a typo, it just picked up the wrong number, so it doesn't change what they were asking for, it was just not, it was a typo.
Yes. Okay, I've seen that the requirements for use variance and for other variances are different.
Right.
And my note says, why for use variance, question mark. Is that relevant?
Why there are 4 criteria for?
No, for people in attendance. For members in attendance.
In terms of the,
The requirements for a quorum and for a number of people to take action is different for a use variance or for other variances. And I'm trying to figure that out.
Okay,
yeah, the
Dave,
zoning enabling act
the
deals with
zoning
that.
enabling that, right now, we have a 6-member board.
Yes.
Until we finish up our housekeeping on the bylaws and everything.
Yes.
So therefore, a 4-member is required to be present. According to the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, we have to have 4 members, of which we have 4. In order for anything to pass tonight, we have to have 4 for any action on items.
I'm just trying to understand why was use variance mentioned in the materials that I reviewed. Somewhere in here, it says use variance is different from all other kinds of variances. And it puzzled me And maybe I'm trying to get some insight into what that was all about. Maybe I'm trying to educate.
Do you have that answer?
Well, if you're talking about what's in the zoning enabling act, you have to ask the state legislature. But generally speaking, that's done because a use variance deals with one of the, with a different aspect than a dimensional variance. Dimensional variance allows the uses, permitted uses to exist. You just change the location within a site from the dimensions required. A use variance would allow someone to ask for a change in a use without going through the rezoning process. So, you know, they're going for something different.
That's understood, but why should the requirement for a quorum be different for use variance or for any other kind of variance? That's what I was trying to figure out.
I mean, even if it did,
I can find it if it's relevant. I don't think it's relevant. But
yeah, I don't think it's relevant either.
And since the issue has come up, that hey, maybe quorum is an issue, and maybe the real issue is who made the motion at the previous meeting. And the person who made the motion was somebody who really shouldn't have been sitting in one of these seats.
Well, and remember, that number is about a use variance. We're dealing with a dimensional variance.
I
So
know.
even then, when he did it with a dimensional variance, it was still
I know.
a different type of variance that I'm not sure you even have the power to grant. I don't think use variances are listed as one of the powers that this ZBA has. Because that is something that is,
If I could just help.
no,
Dave.
well,
Yeah.
The zoning enablement act specifically calls out, there are, certain things can be approved by the board, like tonight, there's 4 of you, 3 of you can approve the minutes, even though it's only half of the makeup of the board.
Sure.
Certain things require a majority of the board, which such as variance, spelled out in the zoning enablement act. So for that reason, that's why there's some differences.
Yeah.
Again, a use variance, that's more of a planning commission thing, isn't it?
well, actually, generally, because you're an incorporated body, you actually do have the option to utilize a use variance, and it is in your powers. But even in that section of the ordinance about use variances, those are 7 criteria. So, once again, it's just the different nature of the application of the powers of the board. You also have the ability to review an appeal from an administrative decision. That doesn't require a different number of board members. It's just that I would think that my interpretation would be because they're asking for a larger number of members, that would mean they believe that it's more severe a decision and consideration, and it should be a larger number of the board should agree that with a use variance and all the consistencies for that exist versus a dimensional variance, which is a different number for a odd number board.
Well, thank you. It's still not totally clear, but I think if I reread these materials, it will become clear based on what you said. You're giving me some insight.
And if you need a copy of the zoning enabling act, which you may have been given some time in the past, we can make you print out another one for you. Just let us know.
No, it's somewhere in here, in this packet. Otherwise, why would I have brought up this thing about use variance?
But the point,
I brought it up because I saw it and I didn't understand what the distinction was. Okay, thank you.
but again, this ordinance is not a use ordinance, it's a setback ordinance. And he has gone through the criteria that our ordinance requires him to review, and that's how his review was directed at. And those points he went through are spelled out in our ordinance.
Well, I wouldn't have brought it up except for the fact that the previous meeting had irregularities as far as the head count was concerned. So,
Is there anything else, Dave?
probably, let me look.
I'll go to Marilyn right now. Marilyn, do you have any other concerns or?
No, I think it's been explained.
Okay.
I don't know.
Susan? Okay, Dave, one more time.
I'm still looking. No, I guess that's all I got right now.
Okay, in saying that, does anyone wish to make a motion to approve or deny deny this request.
Well, I'll try this. I would like to make a motion to approve the requested setbacks. Both variances requested for, do I need to read this number again? PO 04-27-232-004, commonly known as 77 South Gillespie Street, based on the following findings, which are listed under the recommendations from the planner.
Do I have a second on that? Second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Bizzardi, a second by Benner. I need a roll call vote, please.
Any discussion? Often in motions like this, there is reference to the facts that were determined by this body. I'm not sure.
Do you want me to read the six?
She referenced the letter from the planner dated
Well,
November 29th, 2018.
okay, in the event that somebody should challenge this motion,
Stop, I will read them. Compliance with the zoning ordinance standards renders the parcel unbuildable. Number two, the need for variance results from the orientation of the parcel will reduce depth resulting in impractical building envelope. Number three, the resulting lot coverage of 36% is not greater than the maximum allowed to coverage, doesn't make sense, coverage of single-family residential uses. Number four, the variance will provide substantial justice to the applicant and is not adverse to the interest of other property owners in zoning ordinance. Number five, the variance requested is the minimum possible to establish modestly sized residential units. And number six, the need for variance is not self-created.
okay, so the motion then, as it now stands, includes that verbiage.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Are you in agreement to that?
Yes.
Okay.
good. Yeah, I think it's advisable to try to dot the Ts and cross the Is, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Okay, so
And I know I said it backwards.
I need a roll call. I need a roll call vote on that, please.
Okay, Bailey,
Yes.
Bizzardi,
Yes.
Benner,
Yes.
Bama.
Yes. Motion carries. Next item of business is the election of the 2019 officers. I'll take a motion for the president first.
I would like to nominate Rose Bama to be the chairperson.
I'll second.
Motion by Bizzardi, second by Bama to nominate Rose Bama. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Vice chair, I'd like to nominate Susan Bizzardi as vice chair.
Support. I agree.
I have a motion by Bama, a second by Benner to nominate Susan Bizzardi as vice chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'd like also to make a motion to nominate Dave Bailey as secretary.
I'll support.
Motion by Bama, supported by Bizzardi to nominate Dave Bailey as secretary. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we have the presentation and discussion of updates to bylaws for review, and this is basically taking us down to 6 members to 5 members. So I need a motion accepting.
I would like to make a motion to set the membership for the ZBA at 5 with 2 alternates.
Do I Do I have a second on
I
that?
second.
So I have a motion by Bizarre, second by Benner to set the zoning board of appeals membership to 5. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, any additional board member comments? Dave?
No, I think we've had a good meeting, in spite of the stress that has apparently put some people under.
Anyone?
I just was curious on this 6.4 inches, was that supposed to be correct? That was correct. Instead of 6.5, she said it was a. These is a
Well, these
typo,
were
but it doesn't
vacated.
matter.
Typo.
because it
I
doesn't matter.
agree, I just wondered, I'm just
Yes.
curious, I live not too far from the one that it is 6.4.
Anything?
I just want to make sure that this motion that we just made to put on make the membership of the board 5, I want to make sure that that's on the next council meeting so we can get this taken care of officially.
It has to-
I was gonna, we skipped over our comments, number 11, administration.
I hadn't gotten to that yet.
Public comment and.
Oh, yeah, I
administrative
did.
Yeah, you did. So,
I did. I'm sorry.
according to your bylaws need to be presented at one meeting and then adopted at a subsequent meeting. So the change you recommended tonight is a recommendation, but you have to review them at a second meeting before you can adopt them.
So council doesn't have any say in it?
Then they go to
There you
council.
go, council.
If you're, in your bylaws, it talks in the bottom of them, how you amend your bylaws. They are presented at a regular meeting, and then they cannot be approved at that one meeting. They have to be presented at a second meeting before you can take those and send them to council for approval.
Okay.
So tonight, yes, you made the motion to change it from 6 to 5, but you
Yeah,
have to
people will have a meeting.
follow up another meeting and review them again. You can't present them and adopt them at the same meeting.
Okay, so that will be in April, and then May, it will go to council.
Or,
Council meeting.
but they go to April because you're before them.
Oh, good.
But yes, you have to do it at 2 meetings, and they have to be regular meetings. It cannot be done at a separate, special meeting.
Councilmember President Frost, do you have anything for us this evening? Mario, anything additional?
The only thing is that, Dave, you know, that's still an interesting question. I'm not sure why there's 4, like the supermajority, if you will, for a use variance.
Oh, you
But,
found it?
I haven't found it yet, but I will definitely look into
It's
it.
somewhere in the pack.
Yeah, it might be in there. So I was looking through it, so I'll get that answered for you.
And I apologize for circumventing you guys' comments.
I feel I spoke.
So, our next meeting will be April 1st, 2019. And I'll have an adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Support.
All in favor? Good meeting, guys.